One question.
Is your green?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to John Dudley Speaks. I'm your host, John Dudley? The duh is silent. You guys remember Barbenheimer? Who am I kidding? Of course you do. Dressing up in all pink, singing along to Dua Lipa and Ryan Gosling, dreading inevitable impending nuclear holocaust and realizing our days are numbered because the bell can't be unrung. You know, fun times all around. But what if I told you there's another Barbenheimer in town? Two Heimer, if you will. Well, there isn't.
I said forget about it, cuz.
Nothing will ever capture that same energy, because the media and the studios will always try to force something to happen. But hey, that won't stop me from trying. Hashtag Gliicked24.
Arrest this guy, please. Arrest this. You know what? Kill this guy.
Not to annoy or enrage anyone, but Gladiator 2 and Wicked being in the theater on the same day gave me shades of Barbenheimer. And before you say that I'm stupid, this is not a corporate sponsorship. I mean, I have like 100 subscribers. I couldn't get the sponsorship if I wanted to anyway. And I'm not trying to fangirl over Ariana Grande or Paul Mescal. I am for Pedro Pascal, but that's a completely different conversation. But I got the same feeling of pride and love for the art of the blockbuster. And with Moana 2 primed to be the talk of the box office for the next few weeks, inexplicably. I mean, have you even seen a trailer for that movie? I figured we should have a conversation about Gladiator 2 and Wicked before it inevitably gets swallowed up by the news cycle. So here goes nothing. Let's defy gravity with strength and honor. I think what's so interesting about both of these movies is that they and their sources have a similar mainstream appeal and connection to audiences. Gladiator, for one, was a massive cultural event upon its release in 2000, totally huge commercial hit with a 466 million global haul, and it turned out to be the second highest grossing movie that year next to Mission Impossible 2. Its enduring legacy started to show in the ensuing years because of lines like this.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Which was sampled in a Jay-Z track, and even Shrek made a reference to the battle scenes. However, it wasn't just a success with audiences, it was an awards darling. 5 Oscars out of 12 nominations, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Russell Crowe, further cementing him as a household name just so he could do this 22 years later. On the flip side, the Gregory Maguire novel Wicked, which introduced audiences to a revisionist version of Oz, came in 1995, and its darker take on both witches was not only intriguing to the general public, but inspired Broadway legends Stephen Schwartz and Winnie Holzman to elevate the extended lore and transform it into a bombastic musical. The original Broadway run in 2003 is one of the most iconic runs in theater history, with Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth in the lead roles, and it got 3 wins out of 10 Tony nominations, as well as a $56 million gross. So it's safe to say that Wicked was unstoppable in its heyday, and went on to be one of the longest running musicals in history, even doing a limited run as soon as last year. So how do you recapture the magic and wonder that came before, by still remaining true to the innovation behind what made that so successful? Put simply, you recontextualize. What do people value in theaters more than anything nowadays? Spectacle. Now yeah, sure, you could say that moviegoers have enjoyed spectacle since the days of Ben-Hur, and they have, but this is a different kind of spectacle. One that invites curiosity not because of grandiosity, but because of projection. What? Think about the biggest movies of the last half decade, like Dune, or Top Gun Maverick, or Avatar: The Way of Water. Even Barbie and Oppenheimer. All of them are big, bold, bombastic, complexly shot productions that indulge in maximalism and scale. But each movie features a central character with a relatable internal struggle and how that applies to the external world. Therefore, we as an audience, given the consistently insane world that we're living in right now, it's easy for us to take our own weight that we feel on our shoulders and push it onto these characters. Especially characters that we're meant to connect to, like Lucius and Elphaba. The thing is, the predecessors to Wicked and Gladiator had these characters for us to project onto, but from a worldview perspective, they represented something different at the time. Maximus was the strong, silent type with a mean streak, but at his core, he believed in the power of family and the hope for a better future in the name of safety and security. This was super relatable after its release, as we headed into a chaotic time period in terms of global politics just a year later. And Elphaba on Broadway leaned into an angle that spoke about acceptance and individuality amid constant societal pressures, as well as evolving social norms. So in a rampantly homophobic time period, this was incredibly appealing to the LGBTQ+ public. We're at a time in the culture that's similar yet very different, where we're facing consistent threats of war and rollbacks of rights. But Lucius and Elphaba represent a hero that's a legacy act and an agent of change. Lucius is externally anarchic and apathetic, despising the corruption of Rome's emperors and senators, yet he channels that purposelessness into his destiny. Not to become a new Maximus, but to champion a new version of nobility and honor in a world where nobility and honor doesn't exist anymore. Similarly, Elphaba is completely indifferent on the surface, but deeply cares about what others think of her. And it's her underlying empathy that emboldens her to stand up to the wizard, because who else will? Therefore, as she champions acceptance in her own individuality, she inspires others to stand up for what they believe in, giving her a new voice in a time where women are unfairly losing more and more of that voice. So because of that, we have a deconstruction of what came before through a reckoning of the values that were learned decades ago, only for it to be recontextualized in the current climate so it can connect better. In effect, a new version of the epic is born, all because both directors worked very hard to subvert the trappings, or just repeating the very same beats on a thematic and character-driven level.
Popular, you're gonna be popular.
I've said it once, and I'll say it again and again, Denzel Washington is the greatest actor of all time. I could talk about Denzel all day, and honestly, he's deserving of his own video at this point.
King Kong ain't got shit on me!
But his inclusion in Gladiator 2 speaks to a larger theme here: star power. Not only do we have Denzel Washington in a massive supporting role, but Pedro Pascal, bigger than he's ever been due to The Mandalorian and The Last of Us, and now being cast in the Fantastic Four, he plays a major part here. Joseph Quinn, he's here, and he's a massive fan favorite from Stranger Things 4, and also joined Pedro on the Fantastic Four. And then of course Paul Mescal has been putting in work ever since he burst onto the scene with Normal People. So this is a central role that demands our attention. Similar to Dune Part 2, you have a main cast that's led by the future of the blockbuster, and guided by its past and current successes. Wicked does the same exact thing, cognizant of how the audience will respond due to having supersized stars in its cast. So it capitalizes on the traction of the newly Oscar-winning actress Michelle Yeoh, as well as the unique allure of Jeff Goldblum, a strong voice performance of Peter Dinklage, and the red-hot popularity of Bridgerton's Jonathan Bailey.
You were the bane of my existence and the object of all my desires.
But it's Wicked, so none of that matters if the leads aren't up to snuff, which luckily they are. The casting process for Wicked was notably pretty intensive, and once Ariana Grande was announced to be playing Glinda the Good, the internet practically exploded, both with outcries about how she would ruin the character, and claims that she'd be the perfect choice. Personally, I think it's a pick that makes sense given her background in acting and stage work as well as her impeccable vocal talent, so it's a no-brainer. However, it's really the studio and Grande that get the last laugh here, because no matter what, people were going to see her whether they thought she'd be good or bad. To me, that's a bold, smart casting choice, and it pays off even more that Ariana is so unbelievably good in the role, akin to Ryan Gosling as Ken and Barbie in her awards momentum.
Sublime!
Then there's Cynthia Erivo, which was a solid pick from the jump due to her history on the stage. And on top of that, her rising star in Hollywood has garnered her Oscars attention, so it's really the perfect storm of hype around this cast that makes this movie unmissable. But that's not all of what makes these movies all hands on deck affairs. It's the overall ambition and dedication of the production. Ridley Scott committed to the ridiculousness of the battle sequences, even distancing himself from any level of historical accuracy, just so he could enthrall and entertain through a shark-infested challenge as well as riots and full-scale assaults, really doubling down on the violence and the reach of that violence compared to its predecessor. Then on the Wicked side of things, John M. Chu emphasized the level of detail that went into the production design, deviating from the usual uses of CGI, engaging with practical sets and a tangible world-building friendly atmosphere. So when looking back at 2024 as a whole, no other films have been able to leverage their ballooned budgets in terms of cast, scope, and detail like Wicked and Gladiator 2 have. And in a backlot shot, comic book IP-driven landscape that's subtly declining, that's really a breath of fresh air. I had mentioned the world-building aspects of John M. Chu's direction in Wicked, and while I don't fully agree with the dialogue around the flat cinematography and at times dull color grading, it has me a whole lot more excited for a completely different reason. We're talking about it.
What is this man talking about?
On a similar wavelength, I think you could say that the plot developments and the perceived apathy at the core of Gladiator 2 has sparked significant debate, especially over editing and cutting of supporting acts. But that's the thing, people are so passionate about these films that they're willing to engage in discourse around such specific, highly focused topics surrounding them. You could make the argument that Deadpool and Wolverine had the same kind of buzz, but I'd argue that the discourse isn't exactly the same, especially when it's surveying a studio's impact on IP-driven material, IP that's cinematic universe universe driven. On the other hand, Wicked and Gladiator 2 are far more creatively driven. Therefore, they're built around not having to tick off as many boxes. So when you don't have that hang up, people aren't limited by that barrier to entry. So there's more freedom to fixate on the non-IP portions of a piece of art. I haven't seen too much discussion on the portrayals of the characters in the film versus the text, or the allusions to previous material, but instead it's been locked in on technical aspects that affect the way in which we view movies. And that's annoying because, yeah, some people's takes are stupid or short-sighted or just completely off base and terrible, but it's also good. In order for us to keep having dialogues around tastes and the shifting goalposts over what we accept to be quality, opinions matter. And that means the films that we digest have to make decisions, whether good or bad, so that they can stoke our interest and bring us to the theater to figure out what we like. That's why Marvel and Star Wars come under fire so much, because the system over there with Disney is broken. It's trying way too hard to proactively give everyone something that they like when they themselves don't know what they like. So if you're fed the same thing over and over, and then you get something that has a lot more heart and passion embedded into its event status, it makes you question what was peddled to you as an event in the first place. Shouldn't filmmaking choices that are humanistic in nature cause division? Shouldn't a lighting choice or a directing choice or an effects choice make us interact with the film more? Yes, and that's what John M. Chu and Ridley Scott did with these films, providing a sense of personality and character behind these widely anticipated works that'll get people to converse about why they liked it or disliked it, which is what the medium of film should inspire.
What is this feeling so sudden and new?
I enjoyed both Gladiator 2 and Wicked, and I would highly recommend both films, especially if you just want to have a great time with friends and family, because they're above all really fun. And though both movies are widely different due to their varying tones and their varying demographics, they speak the same language with concern to the future of blockbuster filmmaking. And if the response, both critically and commercially, is any indication, the future is looking pretty bright. Alright, that's all I got. Make sure you hit my Substack where I have reviews on both movies, and I also have a new episode on my podcast covering Wicked, so check that out. Otherwise, keep dancing through life, everyone.